folks, Tracy here. Going to give a little bit of an update of our experiences since getting rid of the salt. Now, we've been just doing this for a couple weeks and I still have had salt in the diet, whether I've wanted it or not. I'm doing my best to avoid it. I do go out to eat sometimes with my mom. It's just the way it is. Doing my best to learn how to order better or bring my own food, stick to just getting a latte. But anyway, so just saying, I'm not completely salt-free, just doing my best. We are not cooking with salt, and we're doing, we're making as many and consuming as many potassium-rich foods as we can. It's fall. We happen to love winter squash, and winter squash is a great source of potassium, but also all of the potatoes, sweet potatoes, tubers. We're eating a lot more of those than we'd had in a while. And fruit, bananas, pears, apples, dates are the ones that we're mostly eating, sometimes grapes, but trying to just stick to what we can get locally for the most part, aside from the bananas. So, what have we noticed? Well, first and foremost, when we were low carb, Don was experiencing, and we've mentioned this before, I believe, but a lot of cramping in his calves, and I had a little, but not near the extent that Don did. We were reading at the time Nicola Antonio's book on salt and getting the advice or suggestions that when you have cramping, especially if really low carb, drink some salt water. So he would wake up, have bad cramp, drink some salt water, go back to bed, may have been fine the rest of the night. As time progressed, the longer we were low carb, the more he was having cramping. So not just waking one time a night, but several times a night, and not just in his calves, but then also in his abdomen. So when you start to have a problem like this and it's not going away from the standard advice, then you start to check into what might be going on, what are we needing to do differently. It seems like sometimes too we can get so caught up in these diet tribes that we overlook our own common sense or things we had known in the past, such as eating a lot of potassium to avoid cramping. So anyway, hence was that was the segue into our meats and sweet diet, plus my trigger thumb, which wasn't going away while we were low carb, and I've done videos about that. As soon as we added fruit and honey in the diet, it went away. But through the whole time we were low carb for at least 9 months, my thumb joint locked and the tendon was really swollen, and I could literally hardly even screw a cap or turn things or use my hand very well. So once Don added a lot more potassium to the diet, his cramping went away. But as a result of all that time of adding all that salt, he started to have swelling in the feet. And that was not going away, and it would get worse at night. So we did consider the fact that maybe sometimes we're sitting in a particular chair too long. Something's cutting off circulation, whatever it might be. But when you get swelling in the feet, they kind of look a little white, glistening, and they get really cold because your body is retaining fluid. And now we see this all the time with clients that come to us, especially those who are in their 60s or 70s. A lot of people end up with swollen ankles, swelling at the feet. And this is actually because sodium retains fluid. And when you have that fluid retention, it's like the blood's not getting in there to warm it up. So you're going to feel a coldness in that area where there's like an edema. So again, once getting off the salt while also upping all the potassium-rich foods, the swelling is finally almost completely gone. I believe it's mostly gone, if not all gone at this point. Another issue that Don has experienced some relief from has been itchiness of the scalp from psoriasis. Now, last weekend we were at a birthday party Saturday evening and then at a church kind of potluck the next day, and inadvertently did end up eating foods with added salt. I did try to plan ahead, but I went against my own plans and still kind of participated in some of the food they had. We ate a late lunch to try to avoid being too hungry. They had fruit there, and I brought a roasted beet and carrot. Could have just had fruit and the beets, knowing that those didn't have salt. But anyway, you get to making other things a priority, like not wanting people to feel bad and joining in and blah, blah, blah. And then you learn, like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore because this is my health here. So because we had some salty foods, We both went home that night, went to bed, woke up at 3:30 in the morning, like clockwork, and like I had been doing off and on for so long, sometimes multiple days a week, not being able to fall back asleep. And this just drains my batteries after a while. So not only that, but I noticed another really interesting tidbit. And I'm telling you, once you start to cut the salt out, you're going to be very hypersensitive to the salt. It's almost like I hear people who are smokers that become ex-smokers are even more sensitive to the smoke than some non-smokers are, although that's hard to believe because I'm pretty sensitive to both now. But anyway, one other really interesting thing I noticed since cutting back on the salt is that when I would dream, while having even just the modest, or I thought modest amount of salt in my diet, my dreams were always bad. Like getting attacked, bad things happening. The couple of weeks where I started to have a lot more potassium and cut the salt out, it was like having pleasant dreams if I remember to dream. So I don't know, that's just an interesting observation so far. We'll see if that sticks. But I thought I'd throw that out there because I thought it was kind of interesting. Another thing that I've noticed a difference, and I wish I took before and after pictures. I don't have them, but I don't know if any of you have ever had really dry skin in the elbow. Now mine had turned brown, and we had stained the decks. So I thought maybe I leaned into it. But it was getting like, you could peel. The skin was so rough. So it wasn't just that possibly accidentally stained with the deck stain, but super dry. And now the only other thing I've done other than eating more potassium and getting rid of the salt is I do put lanolin liquid. You can get a thicker gel-like. I just put a little dab of this on my elbows before bed. So maybe that was all it was, but I'm just saying I noticed that the more salt I eat, the more dry I feel. My inner eyes feel dry. My tongue is always feeling dry and thirsty, like I can't quench it. Skin tends to be drier, and for sure, this got pretty dry and bad, and now it's not. So those are some changes. Now there's another thing that's been going on for me, off and on for a long time, and sometimes it tends to happen in spurts or a sequence of 2-3 times in a row. And it bugs the crap out of me because I feel like I should have gotten over it a long time ago. But I have a shingles outbreak that is towards the tailbone where the nerves gather. And it gets triggered if I'm under stress and not sleeping really well. So while eating a high salt diet, of course, there were all these nights where I was waking at 3:30 and not falling back asleep. And this was actually, in retrospect, kind of a challenging year. And we went through it smooth sailing with God's grace all around us throughout. But as I reflected back, I realized, wow, we really went through a lot. And that is partly why I hadn't done videos for a while. But I thought I'd share maybe more of that in a separate video. Suffice it to say, I was having some breakouts and it was really bothering me because they can be they cause fatigue. There might be itchiness, the sort of nerve pain / numbness. And it's just really tender and you're just aware of it, like having a sore tooth or a migraine. And so I did have a breakout recently, but I noticed now, eating more potassium and getting the salt out, they're not near as severe. There's no blistering, there's just a little itchiness, an awareness because I can tell the area is tender, a little bit of tiredness, but all those symptoms are way lessened, and the skin pigmentation that's left behind after breakout that lingers and lingers and lingers and lingers and lingers suddenly was just fading. All these different markings, they look like, you know, where you had like a spider bite. They're all finally going away, as are some other pigmentations that I've had on the bridge of my nose. So, less dryness. My eyes feel a little less dry, though there's still some dryness. I'm still like, you know, having times where I'm getting salt in the diet and I can't stand it because I come home and I feel like I can't drink enough water to quench it, and my tongue feels like that kind of swollen yet dry. I don't sleep as well. For me, eating a saltier diet, no matter how much fiber or whatever, my stools were just drier, lumpier. I've had issues with bloating and constipation a lot of my life. And so I'm looking forward to seeing if I can finally come to a place of regularity, because my pattern was basically regular irregularity, where there'd be, you know, at least one day a week, if not a couple, where there might be nothing, but in between there'd be a lot or a little or whatever. So it was just a kind of a irregular pattern. And that's the one thing that no matter what I've done, I've had some improvement, but nothing has become completely healed in that department. So we'll see if getting the salt, the hydrochloric acid, and all that stuff out of the diet makes a difference. Now, something else that I had stopped taking were a lot of the supplements, realizing that there's like food enzymes with hydrochloric acid, something I thought I needed. I stopped taking because the hydrochloric acid is a form of chloride. The chloride component of sodium or salt, sodium plus chloride, the chloride component is very detrimental to health, even more than just the sodium itself, at least according to the book that I had linked before, Salt and the 7 Deadly Ills. So I highly recommend reading that because he's a chemist and he does a good job explaining everything, and I'll link to it again, and any purchases made through my links or through Amazon are greatly appreciated. But there's also another book, The Salt Solution, and I'll link that below. And that's another take where you'll get some more good information, but he just doesn't separate out salt into sodium and chloride. So he's only really talking about sodium, going lower sodium and upping the potassium. So I know a lot of people have some serious love of salt or salty foods, and I also know a lot of people that don't believe they eat a lot of salt. Now, because we notice this when we're dealing with clients, when we try to get them to eat more bananas or potatoes, they'll say, oh, I eat a lot of bananas. But upon further questioning, they may only have a half a banana at a time. That's not a lot of bananas. That's not even one banana. So when we make recommendations to people, we recommend getting at least the equivalent of, let's say, 2 bananas and 1 potato a day. Whether those are the foods you choose or not, you want to be getting at least 5-6 times more potassium than sodium. And I think the more potassium rich your diet, the better you will end up feeling. Potassium is life. So I suggest to anyone who's willing to try and see how they might feel is to just first off quit salting your food, and then secondly make sure you're eating a lot more potassium rich foods. And it could be beef, milk, cheeses you're going to want to watch out for because they tend to be pretty salty. Eggs also we've cut back on because they have a much higher sodium to potassium ratio than all the other animal foods. But basically fruits, vegetables, grains, beans. We don't eat beans, but beans are super high in potassium. And then of course potatoes, winter squash, sweet potatoes, those are our favorites right now in addition to the fruit. Apples, pears, which are in season, apple cider, grape juice, all this kind of stuff. So I highly recommend getting as much potassium as you can a day, starting with at least the equivalent of, like I said, 2 bananas and a potato, a medium potato, something along those lines, and then even adding more as you can. I believe that this is a really pervasive problem, more than people realize, because salt is in everything and it's really like a sacred cow. It's hard to go up against salt because it's in the food industry in a big way because it's preservative. It helps maintain the food shelf life because it's killing off bacteria. So if it's doing that on the shelf to help preserve something, it's going to be doing that into your body too. So really kind of be open and think about it. The one other thing I want to address is that I've had postural hypotension in my life really badly, and I thought it was because I was low sodium. And I've since, in the last week, come across 2 other women that have it, and they also believe that they need to make sure they eat enough sodium. Doctors tell people with low blood pressure to make sure they eat enough sodium. I don't really think low blood pressure is a problem, but high blood pressure is on a regular basis. But in Chinese medicine, salt congeals the blood. It will help contribute or exacerbate the development of atherosclerosis in the cells. So it's going to make your blood flow more sluggish. And this in turn can be influencing the heart and causing something like postural hypotension possibly, or there's just too low iron, not getting enough red meat in the diet. Anyway, I have to wrap it up. I'm having a memory issue. The phone keeps shutting down. So been eating lots of awesome potassium rich foods. I'll show you some of that in the next video. and keep the discussion going after I empty my memory. But I hope that these, the sharing of what I've been experiencing is motivation for you to try to get some of the salt out of the diet. And until then, God bless. I'll see you in the next video.